to the third place. Here we're going to talk about when darkness reigns. And now here's my question for you. How well do you manage being alone in the dark? So that's the question. How well do you manage being alone in the dark? Have you ever woken up in the dark realizing that you're all alone? So I had that experience when I was young. I fell asleep during church, during an evening service underneath the pew, and I woke up and the building was dark and I was all alone. There was no light, there was no one there, and I just remember it was awful. Besides screaming for my dad and turning on every light in the building, it just turned out that my parents forgot me. But it wasn't a bad forgetting. There were other people taking us home, and we've got past it. The therapist says I'm making good progress, so that's all a good thing. But it's one thing when, if we're alone in the dark by mistake, but it's another thing when it happens intentionally and willfully. And at this stop, I want you to think about this, that self-interest compounds the darkness and deepens the damage. Self-interest compounds the darkness and deepens the damage. Luke 22, verse 47 says this. While he was still speaking, a crowd came up, and the man who was called Judas, one of the 12, was leading them. He approached Jesus to kiss him, but Jesus asked him, Judas, are you betraying the Son of Man with a kiss? When Jesus' followers saw what was going to happen, they said, Lord, should we strike with our swords? And one of them struck the servant of the high priest, cutting off his right ear. But Jesus answered, no more of this. And he touched the man's ear and healed him. Then Jesus said to the chief priests, to the officers of the temple guard, and the elders who had come for him, am I leading a rebellion that you have come with swords and clubs? Every day I was with you in the temple courts and did not lay a hand on you. But this is your hour, when darkness reigns. As our passage started, while he was speaking, and it's kind of like an intrusion of darkness into the serenity of the garden. And here comes Judas with a crowd, and he walks up to Jesus and kisses him, identifying that this is the one that they had come to get. Now, I think thinking about Judas is kind of interesting. You see, he was one that Jesus had called to follow him, and he had chosen to follow Jesus, expecting both revolution and riches. But Jesus kept speaking about death and suffering, and so he made a decision. Get what you can and get out. And so for 30 pieces of silver, he would betray the one who loved him, the one who welcomed him. And as the scene unfolds, one of the disciples, it says, grabs a sword and he lashes out. We find out from John's gospel that it was Peter. And he lashes out and he damages someone in self-defense. And even greater, as Jesus had said even earlier about Peter, not only would he be one who would cut someone's ear off, and Jesus is like, put it away, Peter. But Jesus had already told him that Peter, before the rooster crows, you will deny me 3 times. If we see in the one where he's lashing out in self-defense, we find out that as he gathers to see what's going to happen to Jesus, that a little light begins to betray the allegiance that he's recognized. And so Peter gets into a place of self-preservation. And 3 times he ends up denying Jesus. And I think it's so gripping how it is that Luke accounts. He says, the Lord looked straight at Peter. Then Peter remembered the word the Lord had spoken to him. And it says he went outside and wept bitterly. You see, we see self-interest, we see self-preservation, we see self-defense. We have all these things, and each one of them deepened the darkness that Jesus experienced. That's why I say self-interest compounds the darkness, and and deepens the damage. Because of it, Jesus would face the darkness alone. I think that as you reflect at this place, as you think about 30 pieces of silver, as you think about a rooster crowing, how has your self-interest, your self-preservation, your self-defense harmed others? And the question also is how also may it have alienated you from Jesus? So I would encourage you, even before you leave this place, to think about, how has my self-interest compounded the darkness and deepened the damage? And as you reflect on those, the good news is this, is that Christ never gave up on either Judas or Peter. And Christ will never give up on you.